Well, thank you all for being here. For those new, I'm Mark Weathington, director of the J.C. Ralston Arboretum at North Carolina State. We are right at the beginning, well, not the very beginning of Hellebore season here, but we're really getting into the meat of the season where a lot of them are really starting to go. I've been out of town for the last couple of weeks, so I was walking through my garden just over the last couple of days, and I've got some of the hybrids flowering right now, some that are just starting to go. Let's see, got another one that's just kind of hard to see, just starting. Some of my Hellebores hybridus are fully open. Others, flowers haven't even emerged yet. So it's kind of all over the place with what's happening with them. We get some opening as early as December, and then January more, and then really February and March are when we have a lot in flower. So, hellebores are interesting plants. They used to be just terribly expensive plants because they were difficult to grow in nursery settings up to a decent size. They tend to have issues with rotting a lot of times in nurseries, and they all had to be grown from either seed or from divisions. So if you wanted a special form, a double flowered form like this one, you had to wait and divide it. Otherwise, if you grew it from seed, you had to wait until it flowered to see if it would remain true to type. But we've gotten a lot better at tissue culture. Nurseries have really figured out how to grow them. So there's a whole lot more available now. It's really amazing. Now, often when I'm talking about plants, let me go ahead and share my screen so you don't have to look at me. Often when we're talking about plants, we're talking about our native North American plants, or we're talking about perhaps our a lot of times Asian plants, but really with hellebores, we're really looking at European plants. The species grows from Britain, down through Portugal and Italy and all the way across to Slovenia and Croatia and those kinds of places, north up into Switzerland and France and Majorca, and then it really just one species skips over into China. So this is one of the few plants that we often talk about that are really European in origin. And it depends on your botanist, taxonomist, but there's about 12 to 18 species depending on who you talk to. So I'm going to go through and talk about the species first, and then talk about some of where the breeding's growing and going, and some of the really interesting newer plants on the market. So I'm just did this kind of in alphabetical order because it's easier for me. There are a lot of ways you can break up these hellebores. And I'll hit on some different things, some things that confuse people, like when and how to cut them back, and those kinds of things. The first Hellebores Folius is one that's native to some of the Greek, Italian Isle kind of areas, Corsica and Sardinia, really mostly. And it's one of the ones that's got really just gorgeous foliage. It's thick, really nice dark green. It can kind of range from really glossy to a little more matte. Probably that thickness was really in part to keep the goats and stuff from eating it. And it's one of those ones that the foliage is almost as good as the flowers. The flowers are this really nice pale green, which I think look beautiful on top of the plant. It's much more drought tolerant than a lot of other ones, but it's it can be short lived. But it can reseed a bit through the garden, so it won't take over like some of the older hybrids will, but it can be a little bit short lived. Now, a couple things about hellebores in general, unless I say otherwise. Hellebores mostly grow sun to part shade. Many, but not all, are evergreen. Hoya Folius is a true evergreen. And people often think that the hellebores are all woodland plants because we have always been told to grow them in shade. The truth is, most of these plants grow in more open woodlands, grow in fields. And so what happens is the grasses in these fields grow up over the summer, shade the plants. And then winter, the grasses kind of die back and the plant gets all the sunlight it needs over the winter. So they tend to be better under high shade, high deciduous shade rather than dense evergreen shade. But they're just fine in full sun for the most part. This is one that definitely prefers, sun to light shade more than heavier shade. And it's not the hardiest of the forms. It's really about zones 7 to 9. Now, one way to, I said you can organize these hellebores in different ways. One way to separate them out are the coalescent versus acoalescent. That sounds too scientific. What that means is the stemmed versus the unstemmed. Coalescent means it has a stem. Acoalescent means it doesn't have a main stem. So if you look here on this this picture of, let's see if I get a pointer. Here we go. If you look here on this Hoya Folius, you'll see it has a stem, has leaves coming off the stem and the flowers at the top. Most of the coalescent or stemmed types will, the first year when this stem comes up, it'll just have leaves. The second year, it'll have flowers. So you don't want to cut back that first year or else you won't get the flowers on there. But after it finishes flowering and it's no longer showy, and hellebore flowers, even after they finish flowering, can often stay pretty showy for a long time. But after that, go ahead and cut this all the way back to the ground and new stems will come out from it. And really, that's the way I treat pretty much most of the few coalescent ones there are. But so that's what you do with that one. Don't just cut off the flower. Go ahead and cut it all the way back once the flowers no longer look showy. There are some selections of this. We had a little gold leaf one growing at the Arboretum and it disappeared. This is a variegated one called Juniper Starnes, really nice variegated one. Even the flowers are variegated on it. It's a really bright plant. This is one that does need some shade. You don't want to put this one out in full sun or else it can burn. Now, on the flip side from the coalescent types are the acoalescent, meaning no stem. So all the leaves, all the flower stalks all grow from a growing point that's at ground level or just below ground level. And these plants, this is what most of the hellebores are going to be, the stemless types. And when you plant them, you don't want to plant them too deep. If you really bury that crown, some of the species can have more of a tendency to rot. Atrorubens it grows more on that Croatia, Slovenia side of Europe, and to me it's one of the prettiest of the plants. I really love these kind of slatey blue, burgundy, purple, I don't know what color you call them, flowers. You know, like most hellebores, they tend to hang down a little bit, at least most of the stemless ones. And with modern breeding, really the goal is to lift those up so they look at you. But this is a little delicate plant. This is one that is good for a little bit heavier shade than some of the other ones, but it'll grow full sun to shade. It is one that really does go dormant. The leaves really die back, cut it all back in late fall. And so you don't have anything really there for the winter, but then it all comes out when it flowers and looks really beautiful like this. I find it to be a pretty easy plant to grow and to get to bulk up pretty good size. I don't get good seed set on it generally when I grow it though. Now, Hellebores Choroatticus, which as the name implies is from Croatia, and Hellebores atrorubens are, boy, they're almost identical. There are some distinctions that you got to get really close and look at it very, very closely to tell the difference. But, you know, what are you going to do? This one, though, seems to like a little bit more sun, or I should say it dislikes heavy shade more than atrorubens. But again, it goes dormant, and it tends to go dormant pretty early. And it can be real susceptible to rotting. And so you see here where it's growing, it's in a really well-drained soil, almost a rock garden type situation where it doesn't stay wet during the winter. And that's what you really have to watch out for this. But again, all the foliage goes dormant, so you clean it up like your other perennials, and then it flowers and leaves out kind of at the same time. And it can be variable. In the wild, there are pure green forms of Choroatticus as well. Cyclophilus, this is a Greek Bulgarian type plant. This is probably not the true thing. You have to go to a really good nursery or get seed from the wild, from wild sources to really make sure you have the right thing, because a lot of these will cross pretty easily. So, and they're mostly, the species are mostly grown from seed. So if a nursery is growing a lot of different types of hellebores and they're not as careful as they could be, you could get some hybrids. And this looks like it has, it's veering toward that Hellebores hybridus type. Typically, cyclophilus will have, the flowers will be more green than you're seeing here. But this is another one, sun to light shade, but it really hates dense shade. And there are several forms of this around, several different ones with different types of foliage. But you can see this was last season's foliage. And this is something that people don't often get with hellebores is, yes, hellebores are evergreen, but these clumping types, stemless types, look better if before they start flowering at some point during the winter, you go in and you cut out all the old foliage that's been damaged like this, that doesn't look good. Then you get what you would have if you had done that would really be just these flowers and not these old rough looking leaves that are taken away from the show. And then it'll leaf out again after it finishes flowering or while it's finishing flowering, and you'll have a nice clean clump for the rest of summer. But once it starts flowering, it gets to be a real pain to go in there and clean up those leaves. I know Chris always says he likes to cut back his plants with a lawnmower. And this is one of those ones you could do that with before it starts flowering. You could run it over with a lawnmower and you know, you don't have to get down there and snip it by hand. I don't know if he does that with his hellebores, but you can. Another little cute one that can go from green to white is this Hellebores Dumatorum, kind of Slovenia, Hungary. This is one, again, that likes a pretty fair amount of sun rather than heavy shade. and it really likes light soils. It's not a big fan of heavy clay. Now, if you're like me and you have a lot of heavy clay, I grow a lot of these types of things on a slope, and that even in more clay, that helps keep them from sitting wet. So it really prefers that. And this is a real hardy one. This is hardy to zone 4, but also heat tolerant. So pretty easy one to get out there. All right, now perhaps the most widespread hellebore species hellebore in gardens and in the wild is Hellebores Fetidis, the stinking hellebore. I don't know, maybe you find it more fetid or stinking than I do. I don't really find it very, very smelly. But again, this is like that first one I showed. These are all the tops of stems. And so after it finishes flowering, I go back and cut all the way down at the bottom and it'll usually have new stems coming up that don't have flowers. So those will be the ones that flower the next year. Now this ranges from Britain down to Portugal and across Hungary, Germany, up into France, all over there. And it's pretty tolerant of, it really wants some shade. It full sun, it can get a little bit burnt, but it likes, light to part shade. Now, one thing that we get, especially here where we have a longer season here in the Southeast, is these can get tall. In flower, they can get 3 feet tall. And Hellebores Fetidis tends to have not much of a root system. So sometimes it topples over, it uproots itself. If it does that, you can cut back those heavy flowers and replant it, and it'll usually be okay. It really likes it more on the dry side. This one has a tendency to rot a bit, and they can be very long-lived, but not always, especially in a heavier soil. So, but they will reseed a bit in the garden. And if you get named varieties, they usually, if they're kind of isolated, they'll come usually mostly true from seed. There's some really nice, more silvery leaf forms. Wesker Flisk is one with silvery leaves. And then the actual flower stalks tend to be reddish. Normally they're just this pale green, but sometimes you get the little red lip on there. And because it's been cultivated so long, there are some selected forms and seed strains. There's some variegated ones that are pretty ugly. Varigatus is kind of a catch-all term for a lot of them. Usually the variegation is more yellow than white. This golden showers, I don't know that it's much different from a lot of the other variegatus ones. There is one called Gold Bullion, which is again a seed strain and can be pretty variable, but in its best forms, it's a really pretty looking plant. And this is growing in a dry spot. You see there's a euphorbia that won't tolerate wet at all. And these are growing in a pretty sunny, dry spot. And so while they typically like shade, if you have them in a really well-drained spot, but they're getting water, you can grow them in full sun. There are probably other gold plants that would be easier for you to grow in a spot like that. But if you like your hellebores, it's a good spot to put them. And even the flowers come up pretty yellow on that. Now, in my mind, the prettiest of all the species is Hellebores Lividus. This one actually is a stemmed, it's kind of almost halfway between the coalescent and acoalescent, but it does actually have a stem. But the foliage is so beautiful. It would never need to flower for me to grow it. It makes a nice little low clump, only a few inches tall, maybe in flower, maybe 8 inches or so. It comes from Majorca, so it is tender. It's a 7B8 hardiness, kind of 8 to 9. This one likes richer soils, but well drained. You see here, it's growing with agave, so it's well drained soil, but it's pretty rich. It's grown with trilliums and agaves, and so It's we're happy. It's very happy. Where it's not happy, it'll die. You know, because it's tender, some people who want to stretch it a little bit will kind of mulch it loosely over the winter. You got to be careful with that. If you mulch over it, you can rot it during the winter. It's best with maybe some evergreen limbs laid over it rather than anything heavier. You know, I grow it in a real protected spot at my house, kind of right up beside my house, where it stays a little warm. And if it's going to get down into, you know, below say 15 degrees, if I'm feeling really energetic, I'll throw some old Christmas tree branches on top of it, and then I remove them. I don't leave them there because the winter foliage is gorgeous, and then those soft pink flowers. It's one of the few plants I miss from being able to grow easily when I lived out on the coast in Zone 8. Now, one that I always find confusing is this Hellebores Multifidus, which grows Italy, Montenegro, Croatia, kind of all those areas. This one that I'm showing the whole plant of, this is probably the subspecies Herzegovinus with that very fine serrated foliage, but there are several subspecies or varieties which can be widely different. They go from these green flowers and a broader leaf to more white flowers and these fine leaves. And you can see the kind of leaflets all circle around almost in more of a horseshoe shape. It's not all the way around. Another one that likes part shade. It can tolerate a bit moister soils than other ones, and very hardy, zones 4 to 8. Now, one that I always was told we can't grow well in the Southeast. Well, I listened to people for too long and didn't plant it because of that. And that's the Christmas rose, Hellebores niger. This ranges all across Europe. And in like England, it's probably the most widely grown species. It likes light to full shade. It likes a bit more of a neutral soil than we typically have here. So if you add a little bit of lime, if you have acid soils or some gypsum salts or something like that, that'll often help it. But the thing is, it is slow. It is very, very slow to grow. So you just have to be patient with it. As a plant that grows all over Europe, it has a real wide tolerance, 3 to 7 B or so zones, but it's actually a pretty easy plant to grow if you change your pH a little bit, bring it up a bit, and just be patient with it, and it'll work for you. So Hellebores odorous, another one of these kind of green white ones from Slovenia and Bosnia. I honestly, some of these I have to have a label on them for me to be able to tell them apart, honestly. Another one, sun to part shade, 4 to 8. But now this is another one that's really nice. Purpurescence. This is Hungary, Romania, hardy, 4 to 8, zone 4 to 8. Likes a bit more sun to light to part shade. Comes out, it can have a real glossy, dark flower. And then you see these are actually flowers that are really past. That's the seed pods in there, the seed vesicles inside. So these are really well past the actual flowering stage. And that's the nice thing about a lot of these hellebores is they often look good from flower all the way to fruit. And you can just barely see in these flowers, you can still see some stamens. So these are still fertile and in flower, while these are have been fertilized a while back and are going. So, and this is a small clump, but it's easy to grow, and I think one of the prettiest of the species. Now, this may be the prettiest flower of the flowering species. This Hellebores tibetanus is the one hellebore that jumps over to central China. And it's one that I struggled with for a long time. It's a It really likes sun. It really likes a pretty well-drained soil, but it goes summer dormant. So in places like Raleigh, where we get a lot of, we can get some heavy rains during the summer, that's when we kill it. It rots out. And some people who are growing it and it's healthy, they see it go dormant in the summer and they rip it out because they think it's dead. So it's really one of those plants that's great to plant with other perennials that will go dormant over the winter when this is coming out, almost like a cyclamen. But during the summer, when they're in active growth, they'll take moisture up and allow and keep the hellebore drier. You can do that. You can grow it in a real well-drained raised bed or berm. That works well too. But it really needs sun coming in the spring to build up its reserves over the summer. But it's just the most delicate, pretty thing. I like to grow it on a slope to give it that drainage. During the winter, it'll actually take a fair bit of wet, but it rots out over the summer. So that's the key with it. Finish up with just a few last ones. Porcatus. This is another Bosnia Montenegro type plant. It's that slatey purple flower color, sun to part shade. Pretty easy to grow. It's another one that is often not, you don't get the true thing out in cultivation. And vesicarius. This is a cool little plant. It usually has these green, purple, tinged or striped petals. And those seed the seed vesicles will inflate and get really big on these. Really, really cool. It's another one that goes summer dormant. So you can treat it like the tibetanus, even better drainage. The only other thing to know about this plant is it absolutely 100% hates humidity. So it is almost impossible for us to grow in the Southeast. It just turns to mush in humidity. So if you can get it on a slope where there's really good air movement, you might be able to keep it alive for a while, but I don't know about how long. And the last of the species, viridis, another one of these greenish white flowered forms. They're cute. A lot of these species are for the collector, people like me who have to have one of everything. It's good for the nursery folks because people like me keep buying Hellebores tibetanus and vesicarius and killing them and having to buy more. Now, what you may be most used to with hellebores is this kind of thing. A lot of times it's called Hellebores orientalis. There is a Hellebores orientalis. I don't know if I could figure out exactly what that is. Mostly what you see in cultivation are kind of this mongrel mix of plants that are all lumped into Hellebores hybridus, which most of these are seed-grown plants unless they're named varieties. They range from white to really nice pinks. There's been a lot of breeding to get yellows in there and these slatey blue ones. The Hellebores hybridus are stemless ones, so they'll all come out from a basal plate. And you could mow this down before it starts flowering or cut it back by hand. And if you do that, you'll get the best show. If you don't, you'll have the big old leaves that are pretty ugly in there. So you got to balance that evergreen foliage versus the winter show. So before they start flowering, I cut them all back. Now, people love when these things start seeding, and here you can see some little seedlings, and these these plants, you plant a few of them and you will get seedlings. They will seed and they will form dense, dense mats. And it can be really pretty. And if you go out and you select, all the best pink ones and you plant them together and nothing else around, the seedlings that come up will tend to be good pink ones. If you plant all doubles together, they'll tend to be double. Sometimes you can find something really interesting in these seedlings. Most often it's going to be a mix of things kind of like this. They can actually become a problem. They can seed and spread in woodlands and open spots. So, be careful. I tend to cut back the flower heads on these after they flower to keep them from seeding around, because I don't want seeds everywhere. But they can be really pretty. And this is kind of, these are kind of what you used to see. If you saw something like this red or slatey blue one, you would get really excited. If you saw ones like this one, you could see that that's facing out. That would be something else to be really excited about. The up facing, the really rich colors. You can get really cool forms. I love these spotted or guttated forms like this. I love these really speckled forms. I mean, I just think they're cool. Something else that I think I didn't get a good picture, and you can kind of see it on this one. Sometimes, so you have, the petals, you have all the stamens here. In the center, you have the stigmas, female parts, or the male parts and the female parts. But around the base, you have what are called nectaries. That's what the insects come in for. And usually they're kind of greenish. But in some cases, they can be really dark purple and they can be very, very showy. So that's something that if you buy your hellebores while they're in flower, you can really find some neat things. The great doubles like this. And, these are all pictures I took locally here at Pine Knot Farms and Plant Delights Nursery, who both have open houses coming up where they you can see the hellebores in flower. But I go through these double pickety forms. Oh, I love that. I love that. I love the single spotted ones. I love this, the dark with that pink around it in the singles. I mean, these things, what's going on with these is amazing. And places like Pine Knot Farms and Plant Delights, they'll have, double pickety strains. And what they do is they grow all their double pickety, pink red ones together, and they'll grow them up until they flower, and then pull out any that don't that aren't what they're looking for with that. So on a whole table of these, there'll be a lot of variation, some more double than others, some more pickety, but they'll do that. And same thing with their yellows or yellow spotted ones. It's pretty cool, all the variation you can find. In some, especially the newer hybrids, this is the other exciting thing, is they brought in the beautiful foliage from Lividus and porcatus into these plants. So not only can you get amazing flowers, but you get amazing foliage. So let's get into some of the newer hybrids. Probably not the newest. Actually, this is one of the older ones that used to command a lot of money. It was one of the first that was really widely put into tissue culture, and every great gardener had to have it. Ivory Prince. It's a cross between the Christmas rose, niger, and the Corsican hellebore, Hoya Folius. Got these, like a lot of these hybrids, these soft pinky maroon outside petals that open up white, streaked with green. You see, this is a plant that's been cut back, and so you're getting all that flower power. And then it has nice foliage. It wasn't standout foliage like we see now in some of the hybrids, but it was nice foliage. And it's a good doer. It grows and flowers and bulks up quickly. So it's a good one to grow still. And then the Eric Smithii hybrids, and we start getting into hybrids that these are hybrids with hybrids, and I can't remember all their backgrounds. I could have written it all down, I suppose, but I didn't. So this is one that comes out. Newer flowers open up, have pink buds, open to white, and then as they get fertilized, like this is one that's been fertilized recently, the stamens start dropping off, it starts darkening, and it'll get darker and darker. And here you can see some of the vesicles forming. So you get these dark colored flowers. So it's this multicolored effect. Again, this is one with the foliage cut back. But the Eric Smithii hybrids have some Lividus genetics in them. So they tend to have really nice foliage. Flower color, some better than others. This is Pink Beauty. You see those large kind of yellow nectaries in there, which add to the display on there. Beautiful, rich colored flowers. There's a great variegated one. This is Fire and Ice. This is the new foliage. You can kind of see some older foliage on here. That's where it gets more green with lighter speckling on there. Flowers are pretty nice as well. Now, the one that, everything was looking really good and they were great. Ivory Prince was out there, and then Anna's Red came out. It's part of the Frost Kiss series. And Anna's Red, in my mind, changed everything. Anna's Red, that's kind of where it separated the old hybrids from the new hybrids. Very large flowers, very, very intensely colored flowers, and then really good foliage on there. So good for foliage over a all season, all winter. This is a plant, we planted a mass of this out at our front entrance in some shade because it's so nice. And these are full sun to part shade plants. All of these hybrids can go in full sun, and actually most of them flower and perform even better in more sun than they do in more shade, contrary to what we've often been told. Didn't have a good picture here of Dorothys Dawn, but this is the very newest growth, has that pink in there, and then it'll become more like this once it goes farther, gets past that. So you have Dorothys Dawn and Penny's Pink and Glenda's Gloss and Sally's Shell, and got to name these things something, I guess. Bellardier hybrids, named for Helen Ballard, who was kind of the first person who was really doing a lot with selecting and breeding hellebores. Nice dark green foliage, pink flowers for this one, Spring Party. There are a lot of Bellardier hybrids. That's one I like. Merlin, another one. This HGC, that stands for Huger Gold Coin Collection, or Huger Gold Collection. Huger's a breeding firm, and really across the board, the Huger hellebores that I've grown have been really good performing plants. This one's Merlin, big flowers, nice foliage, really a good performer. The HGC Ice and Roses Red. Look at the size of that flower. I don't have giganto hands, but that's my hand on that thing. That's 4 inches at least across. And most of these HGC hybrids, a lot of the hybrids are sterile or mostly sterile, so you don't have them seeding out all over the place, which I appreciate. So that's a quick little primer on hellebores, and I see there's a lot of questions in there. I'm sure Chris has answered a bunch, but I'll answer questions as long as y'all like. The real takeaway for this is for the most part, hellebores don't want deep, deep shade. They really especially appreciate some sun during the winter. That's kind of how they've evolved, is to take advantage of sun during the winter, and then they'll often get shaded or covered up over summer. You really, those of you who are local, I know we have people from all over the place. Those of you who are local are really in a great spot, because we have some of the best hellebore growers in around right here at Plant Delights Nursery and Pine Knot Farms, which is just across the border in Virginia. And boy, it's worth going out there for their open houses. Always worth going out for that. I told you I would talk a little bit more about our winter symposium. We won't be talking about hellebores there. We'll be talking about China, which Ernest Wilson called the mother of gardens, famously. This is, to me, a really exciting program. We've got really 3 different looks at China. The first is what this picture shows, the West Lake District. This is Eastern China. It's south of Shanghai in Hangzhou, which is Zhejiang province, or right, borders Zhejiang. I mean, it is not well known in the West, but in China, it is a real destination spot, and it is gorgeous. It is islands linked with these bridges. There are boats that you can take out on the water. Food is amazing out there. They have several dishes which are really famous, like the beggar's chicken, which there's a whole story behind it, but it's partially cooked in, has a mud layer on it, covered in bamboo and leaves and then mud, and cook. It's so good. And then we've got Chris Bachtel from the Morton Arboretum, who's just an expert. He's been collecting in China for decades. And you probably, most of you know the paper bark maple, Acer gricium. He was part of a kind of the lead of a group that was really looking at why they were starting to not grow well in the US, and really looked at the genetics of what was in cultivation in the West, and then going to China and finding them all in the wild and helping conserve them and really look at the genetics. And it is a fascinating story that is behind that I'm really excited to get him to come in and talk about it. And then I'll talk about some common and rare plants from China that can really elevate your garden, and not just the plants, but the stories behind them, both my personal stories behind them, but also stories of other collectors, stories from China itself about those plants. And to me, that's what makes the garden fascinating, is all those stories. And then, of course, we've got a rare plant auction that goes along with it. That will start, I believe, I don't want to say it wrong because people get mad at me, but Wednesday or Thursday before the symposium starts. And then we'll finish, I think, at 1 o'clock on February 19th. And we have got some awesome plants. I mean, they're not all from China, but a lot of them are, but rare things, hard things to get your hands on. It's really good. I know with these auctions we do, I usually wind up spending more than I had planned, and same goes for some of the rest of the staff. Smaller plants we will ship, so you don't have to be here locally to participate. Oh, so Marianne, I'm glad you asked this question about Pine Knot Farms. They're in Clarksville, Virginia. There is a farm called Pine Knot Farms in North Carolina. It is not the same thing. You can take a very scenic drive to the one in North Carolina, followed by a drive to Clarksville, Virginia, if you want. I have done that before when I punch something into my GPS without looking at it very closely. So yes, you want to go to Clarksville. Marilyn also said that hellebores do well in containers for her, and that is true. Hellebores are great in containers. Many of them really do well in containers. The other thing with hellebores is hellebores, they've had some in their history, and I didn't really get into the history in Europe, but they've had some medicinal, but also some more sinister uses, because they can be poisonous. Not bad, they're not going to kill any people, but deer tend to stay away from them. Don't yell at me if deer eat your hellebore, but deer tend to stay away from them. In fact, we got some, so I'll often plant lilies and hellebores together, and sometimes that'll keep the critters away from my lilies, which they like to eat because they're surrounded by hellebores. So yeah, I'm glad about that. Arlene has put the Winter Symposium registration link in there. It will be in person and online. So we will have a limit for the number of in-person we can have, just to be safe. And you do have to wear a mask if you are here in person. But you can also join us online. In fact, one of our speakers will be joining us online as well. So it'll be a very shared hybrid experience for everybody. If you are here, we're going to, I think outside maybe, we're going to have a tea tasting from somebody who is local here, but went to school for tea studies in Zhejiang, at Zhejiang University, which is right where Westlake is. So all kind of links here.
Graduate degree even.
A graduate degree in Zhejiang. The symposium, Arlene also put that in there, that opens at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, February 16th, closes at 1 o'clock on February 19th. Hope you'll be there for that. Maybe we'll put some hellebores in it. We don't have any in right now, I don't think. Chris, are there...
Yeah, there were some things that I wasn't able to address. You did talk just a moment about container gardens, make some good plants. There were several people asking about that. I've never grown them in a container myself, other than one which died.
Oh, I think it was
overwatered.
I do want to mention something else.
Okay.
If you want to know about hellebores, I'm going to turn off my background.
There you
go. Well, I thought I turned off my background. None.
There you go.
There's several Hellebore books. And my dog. This Hellebore book, a comprehensive guide. This was written by Colston Burrell, who's a great gardener, and Judith Tyler, the unfortunately late Jewish Judith Tyler. She passed away a few years back, but she and Dick Tyler are, I don't know how to say that. She was one of the owners of Pine Knot Farms. Dick Tyler, her husband, still runs Pine Knot Farms, and he did all the photography in here. So this is a great resource, and especially for the local folks, because she's really coming at it from a gardening area like we have here.
Thank you, Mark. Going back to the container thing, I was just hoping to address some care for the plants long term.
Sure.
Fertility, things like that.
So they almost all the hellebores prefer a neutral-ish soil. So whether in the ground or in the container, you need to keep that in mind, because both can have quite a bit of it can be fairly acid. I prefer in containers. I prefer a pretty light mix, like a nursery potting mix with a fair amount of pine bark in there. I find most bag mixes are really very heavy, and that's fine for real quick growing, quick feeding plants like annuals and things. But if it's going to be in a container for much longer, I prefer a lighter mix. And I would repot them every couple of years to get new mix in there. You know, if you can get close to pH of 7, that's great. In the garden, I'm not getting anywhere close to a pH of 7. And I don't lime mine at home. We don't lime them at the Arboretum, at least not much. You can. What do we, what some other questions? And in containers, the ones that go summer dormant, like tibetanus, you want to put them somewhere where they stay pretty dry during the summer, but not dry out completely. You know, put them under the eave of the house and every couple of weeks water them. Be careful about too much water during the winter. They can rot out that way, and don't put them in too big a container too quickly, because rotting is the main way people kill them, is by rotting them out.
So one of our earlier questions, Mark, involved someone living in zone 8. And she also has a house in zone 7, and they do very well in zone 7. And I think, if I remember right, her house is more coastal in zone 8. Her plants grow well, they just don't flower all that well. Is there a chilling requirement they may not be getting? Someone also commented maybe there's salt spray if she is awfully close to the salt water.
It shouldn't be chilling. I grew them. Many of the pictures I showed were from a zone 8 coastal Virginia garden.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, if you're getting down, you know, in the 30s, you know, at all over the winter, I think you're fine. There may be a few species that need more of a chilling, but the newer hybrids all have like Lividus in them to get that great foliage, and they don't have any problem with it, and the hybridus ones don't have any problems with it. So yeah. Some other things. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there was some concern about some of them seeding around a bit. And I commented that I think I only know of the 2 that really spread around all that much: Hellebores orientalis, the hybrid one, or Hellebores hybridus, and then of course Fetidis.
Yeah.
Anyone else seed around all that much?
No, not at all. And really, the Fetidis I don't find to be a problem.
No.
It's pretty easy to whip it, you know, get it out. And really, I usually cut back the stems on Fetidis before the vesicles have released, so with all the seed in there. The orientalis really can be a problem, both in the garden and potentially beyond. It's not moved around by animals, so it doesn't spread, it doesn't jump far, but over time it can move through a woodland. And there are some examples of that. You can cut the flowers off before they set seed. That's kind of the best way to do it. Yeah. And I heard some things about, I think there's some questions about transplanting them.
Yeah, I was gonna go there next.
I have never had issues with transplanting hellebores. Hellebore hybridus is easy. I stick a shovel in it and split it in half and pull it out without digging it up carefully and move it around, and no problem. Hellebores niger can be a little more miffy, as the British say about that. What you want to do is move it either in early spring or in mid fall. You don't want to do it right during the summer or really hot periods like that. I find if you move it while it's cool is the best time. It has some time to reestablish before growing, but I would, in general, I would move it October to through March, and wouldn't do it during the summer at all.
So I commented earlier in the chat that I think it was the acoalescent ones that you can dig and divide like you do hostas, but the coalescent ones are just a single stem. There might be two individuals down there that grew from a seed, but they're not.
Well, they can form multiple of those stems,
okay.
You know, as they age. But still, it's hard. You can divide that when it does that, but that's a lot more difficult until you get a really good sized clump.
Okay.
When you get a good sized clump, you can chunk off a piece of it.
Okay. And it looks like we're going back to the mowing. You got people quite excited about that. I have not actually mowed mine. Mine are in a raised bed where it's just too hard to get the mower. And then I have just one here, one there kind of a thing. So it's just single pruning. But I would think you could definitely mow it if you felt like it, or even just head shears or something else, weed whacker, but do it early. You don't want to wait. Now it's too late. As far as I know, I went to do it in over Christmas break and it was already too late.
Yeah.
Bryce took his weed whacker to his for the first time before Christmas, and his are great.
Who's that?
Bryce, in one of his classes. He did little photography shoots before and afters.
Yeah. So yeah, that's when I do it. And you really could, you know, if you have Hellebores hybridus that is spreading, you know, you have it in a pretty good size area and it is spreading and it's growing vigorously, you could really mow it, you know, early December, let it flower and be beautiful. And when the flowers start really fading, run over it again, cut off those flowers and the new foliage. They'll put out more foliage. And that'll kind of slow them down, but it'll also keep the seed from being dispersed, as long as you cut them down again before the seed is ripe.
I think that might take care of the questions. I might have missed something in there, Mark, but so if anyone has a question that we missed, go ahead and type it again.
Yeah.
Someone just says they have full sun in the morning and wondering if, and early afternoon, is that too much sun for them?
Not most of them, no.
Okay.
I have, most of my hellebores are out in full sun. Quite honestly, I actually don't plant them almost at all in my, I'm trying to think, I may not have any in my woodland. I have them all out in more or less full sun.
And Sue just asked about the fertilizing. I commented I've never fertilized mine at home before, and I don't think we've ever fertilized ours here.
No.
Any general comments about them, about fertilizing?
So here where we are on this red clay, our soils are rich and full of nutrients, and I discourage people from fertilizing because we have a real issue with over fertilization and nutrients moving into our waterways, and we have got to stop that. That is one of the single biggest pollutants is non-point source pollution mostly from our lawns, but also from people over fertilizing gardens. You've been told by Miracle Grow you need to fertilize. It's not true. It's just not true. So we mulch with partially broken down, partially composted leaves. They break down more. That fertilizes our plants. That does it for us. We just don't do more here.
Someone asked about the open houses. I looked up Pine Knot Farms earlier. I put it in the chat. Their open houses start next week, and I think run at least through end of February. More focused on the weekends. Definitely check their website out for details. And Plant Delights and Juniper Love Botanic Gardens open houses are typically the last weekend in February and the first weekend in March. So theirs are also coming up. But again, check their websites for date and times.
Yeah. There's a question about the auction. The auction is a silent auction. Opens 10 a.m. on Wednesday, February 16th. Closes 1:00 p.m. Saturday, February 19th. There will not be any plants for sale. You know, that's just the auction. We do have our plant trailer out here, so you can come out anytime and purchase plants there. It's cash or check. Or do we do cards on there now too? Arlene?
For the plant buggy, Mark?
Yeah.
I was reading a question too. Yeah, the plant bucket can take credit cards now. That's fully operational.
Woohoo, new thing. I went away for 2 weeks and staff made improved everything here. I'm going to stay away for a month next time.
It's what we do.
And on that cart right now, I saw we had Osmanthus heterophilus ogon, and there were several other things. I may have to pick up some for myself.
Oh, Carolyn just asked a very good one. Carolyn, yes, Barrel Road is closed at the I-440 overpass. So you don't want to come in from the east side when you visit the Arboretum for the next few weeks. Approach from the west from the fairgrounds area.
Yeah, come from Blue Ridge Fairground area. There's somebody who's, I think this has been there, thinking planting hellebores and north in pots between them because they can't plant in the ground. Yeah, it seems like it should be fine doing that. You know, if it's really dark, they may not do well, but if you did the hybridis types, you'd probably be fine with that. You have to be concerned about plants getting too close together in a 15-year-old garden. The Hellebores orientalis hybridis types, I mean, that'll shade out the seedlings. That actually helps with the seedlings, but you can, if you don't like it, you can thin them out, but you don't need to.
And the seedlings will grow where it's sunny enough and won't grow where it isn't.
So I said I wouldn't think the hellebores would like full sun at the coast. Most of them are full sun to light to part shade. So you could put them in some shade. If you have sandy soils at the coast, they want more shade. But otherwise, even when I lived at the coast, now I had a fairly heavy soil still. I grew them in light shade, you know, high shade. All right.
Someone did ask if they were to buy a hellebore real soon at one of the open houses, would they plant it now? And I definitely would recommend it.
Yep. Yeah, we could talk about composting. Any other? Yeah, man, Dick Tyler and his staff are so good at about hellebores, and they have other vendors there selling other things, usually winter stuff, galanthus and cyclamen and witch hazels and winter daphne and all kinds of great stuff. Seedlings give you plants to trade. That is true. Yes. Cedar Creek Galleries, yeah, stop there on your way. They got great plants and pottery. Excellent. Excellent.
I think that's all the questions, Mark. So thank you so much for an awesome presentation as always. Great to have you here. And it's of course great to have all the people in our audience joining us online on a weekly basis. Glad you can join us and have a great week. Enjoy the wonderful weather if you live kind of nearby us, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.
Yeah, and hope to see you at our winter symposium.
Thanks very much. Great session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, it's good to see all y'all.